Bruce DuMont back on hour number 2 of Beyond the Beltway. Thank you very much for joining us here on the 28th of June. And again, we are celebrating our 40th anniversary of this program tonight. It began as a public radio show, as an experiment, 13-week experiment for WBEZ Radio in 1980 to cover the presidential nominations that were going on in both the Republican and Democratic Party. And here we are 40 years later, and we're still here. One thing we always had good, lively guests. We always tried to cover all the bases and make sure that we were fair and balanced, if not on one show, at least collectively, as we present shows to you each and every week. Joining us now are three longtime guests on this program. And first of all, we welcome Rick Garcia. He joins us from his home in Chicago. He is our liberal Democrat. Also, we are welcoming Dawn Larsen. And she is joining us from her new home in South Dakota. She spent many years in the state of Illinois and was very involved in the Ross Perot boomlet. And also Kenton McCarthy joins us. He joins us from his home in Arizona, and he was raised in Chicago and has been a card-carrying conservative, member, a fiscal conservative on this program for many, many years. I'd like to begin by asking everybody your reaction to something that's been going on, and that is the tearing down of statutes. Some have been taken down by cities and municipalities. A lot of them have been torn down by mobs. And I want to get to the broader issue, but I want to start with you, Ken. What's your take on whether or not statutes as it relates to Civil War heroes, whether they should be removed from the public square? I'm not hearing anybody. I'm not hearing Kenton. Are you speaking?
I am now.
Okay, well, it's always good to have the microphone on, especially if you're doing radio.
Yeah, I heard that.
Did you hear the question?
Yeah, I heard the question.
What's the answer?
I think there's two parts to it. It's a cultural revolution at the same time that it's a Marxist revolution. And if you look at Marxist history, and there's always an attempt to clean the slate, to burn the crops and salt the earth and start over. That's why if you look at a Mao parade or a Communist China parade, you always see the number 1949. To the Chinese Communist Party, the world began in 1949. Pol Pot created year zero. So if you scrub the history, if you scrub a civilization of its history, you can start fresh much easier. That's why I think it's dangerous. We're getting into uncharted territory when a rental mob is allowed and permitted and allowed to go and destroy the fabric of our society with no debate whatsoever.
Okay, let's go to Rick Garcia. I want to get your reaction. You're the liberal progressive on our show this evening. What's your reaction to this? What's happening?
Bruce, when I first started to do your show, I was an independent.
Yes,
and
it was
now
a long time ago.
I'm a liberal Democrat. But let me tell you this. When you said...
You don't disagree with that title, do you?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Today, I do not.
Okay.
That was a very accurate title.
Okay.
But let me tell you this. You said civil rights here. Heroes. They were not heroes. They were traitors. Those statues were of the Confederacy. The Confederacy that was against the Union. They lost. And those statues were not put up during the Confederacy. They were not put up right after it. They were put up in the 20th century to tell colored people, watch yourself.
Okay.
Because the South will rise again. So this is, why are we raising up and honoring traitors
Okay.
to this nation.
All right, I want to get reaction from Dawn, and then I want to follow up with some of these points. Dawn Larsen, you're from out there in South Dakota. You're a reform type. How do you feel about those who are engaged in the public square right now that are just saying there are things in this public square we don't want it. We want to change it?
Well, I really have to go back in history to a time when you started your radio show and I was a young housewife. I was one of those nasty Reagan Democrats. I gave up on the Democrat Party because I felt they gave up on me, and that has not changed. I'm shocked and discouraged that not one Democrat I know has stood up and condemned the violence. I have no problem if communities want to come together and take a reasonable vote and decide what to do with their own statuary. But to be threatening the public and removing things and tearing down things like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, my gosh, like it or not, this was a civil war.
Honey,
This
they
was
haven't-
America.
they haven't
I
torn
didn't
them
interrupt you. I'd rather you didn't interrupt me. To tear down things that belong to the entire country, Republican, Democrat, Independent, black, white, it doesn't matter. This is American history. We teach our children what not to do by showing them what happened. And I'm appalled at the violence. It's dangerous. You can roll your eyes at me, but you're
I am
wrong.
rolling my eyes at you.
Okay,
No
well,
one is
let's go
suggesting
back to Rick, and then we're going to go
All
to Kenton. Go
No
ahead.
one's suggesting that George Washington or Abraham Lincoln should have their statues taken down. That
Yes,
is
they
the
are.
rule.
Some people
Yes, they are. Your candidate for president has
Wait,
not.
a sister woman, you don't know who my candidate is, okay?
Your party.
So stop
candidate,
right there.
I apologize. The Democrat
Thank you.
candidate has not condemned the violence. No elected member of Congress has condemned the violence. And might I point out that every single member of the Confederacy started out as a Democrat, and people forget their history. If we tear down those statues, nobody will know. Those statues are there to educate the public.
No, those statues
one
are
second.
there.
One second.
Those statues are there, and this is really well known. Those statues are there to intimidate African Americans and to tell them that they are to stay in their place. That is what those statues are about. And you know
In
what?
your
You may
opinion.
not like it.
Now, would you
That is honest to
acknowledge
God's
though? Would
truth.
you acknowledge
And
though?
secondly, they are traitors. So you think we should have statues honoring traitors of our country?
Well, let me
It
ask.
doesn't matter what
Rick,
I
Rick,
think.
let
It
me
matters
one
what
sec-
the
let me
public
finish. Let me finish and jump in.
violence is wrong.
1 second, folks. 1 second. We got a barn burner of a discussion here. But Rick, let me go back to you. Okay.
Yes.
I agree with you that they should not be rewarded because they were traitors. And my question to you is, because you were right, these things did not go up right after the Civil War. They went up in the 50s and 60s. And again, the reason that you state that they were put up, I don't know whether that's true or not, but there may be some truth to it. But would you acknowledge that the people that put those up, they were all Democrats? They were all Democrats at the local level. They were Democrats at the national level. All of those military bases that were named for traitors, as you've called them, they were all named under Democratic administrations. Back shortly from Chicago. Bruce DuMont back. Nice to have you with us this evening. And let's go to Kenton McCarthy. And Kenton, I want to sort of broaden the discussion with you because you're from Arizona, and the president visited Arizona last week. Arizona is one of those states that has seen a bump in coronavirus cases. And give us your report from the. Go ahead. What's your reaction to how people are reacting to it out there?
Well, it's tough because we've seen a dramatic spike. We have hospitals that are nudging upwards to capacity constraints, which is a big concern. The good news is the mortality rate is falling. Bad news is younger people are getting it, but it's noticeably less severe. So more people are surviving it, but our caseload is really concerning. And you've got Senator Sinema, who is hell-bent on locking us down again. She spends her day beating up on Doug Ducey to force us. We'll probably get a bars and restaurants closing again probably tomorrow, I'm guessing. Because with Florida and Texas doing that. Go ahead.
Are people in Arizona, the people that you deal with on a regular basis, are they frustrated? Are they blaming both sides? Are they realizing that we're going to have to live with this or die with this, and yet we can't close Arizona again? How are they reacting to it in a very practical way?
They're frustrated. They're concerned. I don't think anyone's eager for another lockdown. We lost 650,000 jobs in April, and those jobs, most of those were the most economically vulnerable. So it's taken a big toll. Ducey has promised not to lock us down again. It's going to be hard for him politically. Here's what you have to remember. Everything, whether it's BLM, Antifa, or COVID, everything hinges on November 3rd. That's always in play. Any discussion you have, any strategy you deploy, it all hinges on November 3rd. We've got the Senate race. The Democrats will probably flip the seat here and flip it handily. That's why you had Trump come down and do his rally. I think that was an effort to not just prop him up, but prop McSally up as best he could.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a problem with our caseload and our healthcare system under strain. It's going to be real difficult to continue to open up expansively.
Dawn Larsen, to you, you're in South Dakota. How do those who live in South Dakota, how do they view COVID-19 and some of the devastation that's taking place in other states around the nation, and not so much in South Dakota?
Well, I think one thing to know is that in our state, the hotspot we had was due to the meat processing plant over in Sioux Falls, which is on the border between Minnesota and South Dakota. Over 3,000 cases of our 4,000 cases are there. Most of the deaths were there. I mean, for most of our state, this has not been a problem until now. The reason it's a problem now is that it's tourist season. Our income in this state relies on tourists. We have to have tourists. People come here from all over the world to go to Mount Rushmore, to go to the Badlands, to whatever it is. So we're all very, very cautious right now. We were never in lockdown. We didn't need to be. We're all responsible here. Most people in my state live in and practice social distancing. They're miles away from their neighbors. Okay, it's a very rural state. But like I say, it's about, we're looking at tourism, but at the same time, we're also shocked and appalled at the absolute tyranny that some of these governors are engaged in. Why would you force people not to go to church and yet allow people to go to the liquor store or to any one of a number of other things? They can protest in the street shoulder to shoulder without masks in Detroit, but they can't go to church.
I want to follow up on that in a moment, but I want to go to Rick. Rick, on the subject of coronavirus, one of the industries hit hardest has been the hospitality industry and specifically the restaurant industry. Those industries, they employ a lot of gay and lesbian employees. What has been the reaction in your sphere of influence in Chicago's gay and lesbian community to the way this has been handled at the local level by the mayor, who is African American and a lesbian, or even at the state level? Are they viewing it positively, or are they getting as frustrated as everybody else because they can't open their bars and restaurants?
No, I think, let me tell you this. Let's look at the map and let's look where the infections are and what is happening. The great state of Illinois had yesterday, I think, 300 new COVID cases. all right? Because our mayor and our governor have been hard asked about making sure that people social distance, wear masks, close things down. Let's look at Florida yesterday. 8,000 new COVID cases because they wanted to open up. And I will tell you this.
But what about the bars Rick? What about the bars and restaurants in the Chicagoland area? Because they have not been singing the praises of the mayor or the governor because they wanted to open.
I mean, the gay bars and the gay bar owners that I know have been really hesitant even to open up now. And because what is more important, people's lives or having your business open? And I'm very proud of the lesbian and gay owners of restaurants and bars who have said, let's do it responsibly. Let's make sure everybody is protected because human life is more important than anything. And we see.
But I want to go back to. I want to go to Kenton because I want to see whether he agrees with that, or does he think that there has to be a happy medium where there's some we have to have a risk of death because we also need to pay the rent the next month. Kenton?
Well, here's the thing. First of all, it's often lost that economic activity generates the revenue and the wealth to take care of 6 people. So you can't just close down an economy and expect revenue to be there or the Federal Reserve to print enough money to take care of people. There has to be activity. An old Chinese proverb says life is balance. There's got to be a balance somehow. We're still in this binary situation where you have to make one choice versus the other. This virus Mother Nature doesn't give us the menu options that our current vanity thinks we are due. We don't have it. We are going to lose people regardless of what we do. So if you have an approach that is reasoned and is responsible, you can have economic activity and you can have constraints and you can have health directives that seek to minimize the damage.
Dawn, a question to you. You when I introduced you, I said you and I met when the Ross Perot movement was just getting started, and you were one of the most active members in the state of Illinois, and you were just you were 100% in for Ross Perot, and we went through that in 1992, the rise and fall of Ross Perot. He's in, he's out, and again, you and I had we did. You were a virtual guest every single week on this program, and it's one of the things we've done over the years is when there's a movement out there, whether it's the Reform Party or Ross Perot or Donald Trump, when something is going on in the body politic, we pick up on it and we discover it and we give a lot of exposure to it. So my question at this, so you sort of understand when there's something going on in the political waters out there. As you sit in South Dakota, which I would say probably is going to be a safe state for Donald Trump, how do you see his reelection chances? Are you positive? Are you feeling something that there's out there that's going to send him back for another 4 years, or are you worried?
I'm not worried at all, and I'll tell you why. First of all, this isn't 1992. We're not running around with index cards and huge, gigantic cell phones and no computers. This is a very digital age. We have laptops and computers and devices and all kinds of social media. And that's where I live now. I'm not out knocking on doors anymore. I'm on social media and I'm on it a lot. And what I'm seeing is that the states that he won last time, I don't know what the polls say, they measure popular vote, but the states he won last time, I've not seen in any case where Biden legitimately is going to flip that state. Number one, states like mine, they don't even have an office here for the Democrat Party. They're certainly not going to have an office here for Biden. And the same is true in other Democrat states. I'm hearing a lot from the younger, disgruntled Democrats who are very much where I was in 1980. These are people that did not vote for Donald Trump in 2016. These are people that were so ticked off that the Democrats cheated Bernie Sanders that they did not vote. Well, guess what? They're not voting for Biden. He's part of the same Democrat establishment. So suddenly now, because of Mr. Trump's positions on things like trade, which, by the way, are very similar to Ross Perot,
Right.
On manufacturing, on jobs, on getting people back to work, on his crime bill that was presented in the Senate and defeated by Democrats, on his work for justice reform. He's the first president to do it. We had a Democrat.
Dawn, we've got to pause.
We've got to
pause. We got to pause. We're going to a break. When we come back, we're going to hear from Rick Garcia, who's going to comment on what you just said. Back shortly. Bruce DuMont back on Beyond the Beltway. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. We have not spent too much time during the body of the program talking about the 40th anniversary of the show. We may spend a couple more minutes on it before we go off the air. But I do want to call to your attention that if you go to our website, which is beyondthebeltway.com, beyondthebeltway.com, there will be a whole gallery of pictures over the last 40 years. You'll be able to hear the very first show, some anniversary shows, the show we did after September 11th, some memorable shows from the archives of Beyond the Beltway, and also a lot of gallery pictures, including some of the guests who are with us this evening. So again, keep that in mind, beyondthebeltway.com. And our guests right now, we're going to let them introduce themselves, and let us begin with Rick Garcia. Rick, tell us a little bit about what you do and how you became involved with this program many, many years ago.
Well, Bruce, I'm so glad you asked that. I have been a gay civil rights activist for more than 40 years. But one of the things that I remember is when I was still a kid, I did Beyond the Beltway. And over the years, I have done it. And I always appreciated how you brought diverse people with divergent views together for respectful conversation. Not like everybody screaming at each other, even though I think I've screamed at some people. But and you know what? In the 40 years of gay activism, Beyond the Beltway discussed every major issue and was there for every major issue that faced the LGBTQ community. For instance, I remember I can't remember the year. I'm horrible about years, but the first state that legislatively allowed same-sex marriage, you had a show in Boston.
Yes.
That was
that was one of the memorable shows because we were there. It was on the eve of the first gay marriage in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Exactly.
And after that program, I went with the engineer of the show from WRKO Radio. He was going out to check it out. So I said, "Do you mind if I tag along?" We went out to Cambridge, Massachusetts. There were tens of thousands of people in the street standing outside the courthouse waiting for the first gay marriages in the United States to be issued by the clerk there. And in the midst of this huge crowd of tens of thousands of people, I see Rick Garcia, and I also see Art Johnson, who is one of the leading activists in the gay rights movement. Out of all these people, I run into you right there. Memorable night.
I have been looking for the picture of us. But one of my most favorite memories is the 25th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. You called me and said, "Can you be on the show?" And I said, "Bruce, I can't because I'm in New York City for the big National March for Gay Rights."
Right.
And you said, "Well, can you call me?" This is before cell phones.
Right.
And I did it from a payphone in
Wow.
front of the stone wall inn.
You
Remember that?
You must
And
have
Cliff
had.
Kelly
You must have
was
had.
on your
You
show
must
that
have had
night.
a lot of quarters. We want to move on. I want to go. Dawn Larsen, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to now and how we met. Well, I think I told everybody how we met, but go ahead.
Yeah, we met during the Perot years. I think I was on the show the last time in 1998. It was a pretty regular fixture from 92 till then.
Yes.
Um, my basic background, I started to say earlier, I'm one of the nasty Reagan Democrats and really have never bonded with any political party, primarily because of the extremes in both parties. I don't think that we can save our country and do the things we need to do through a political party. I think it's going to happen with the broadest possible coalition of the middle. I think one time someone called us as the pro movement the radical middle. And I think in a very real way, because we morphed into things like the Tea Party and the Perot movement became the Trump movement. I think what we are is that radical middle. There's 20% on the left, there's 20% on the right, far left, and we're the rest of the country. And I think that's what's going to be the future. I think in the end, and I think 2020 is going to be another bellwether. Our president was not a born Republican. He ran as a Republican. But I think that he is the bellwether. He's the person who's going to change the country more than he already has.
Okay.
What other president could have weathered this storm? So that's who I am now. Like I say, I spend most of my time on social media. I still repair computers for a living.
And he's heading, he's heading to your. He's going to head to South Dakota for the Mount Rushmore celebration on the 4th of July.
He is. He'll be here on Friday, and so will a lot of people.
I want to switch over to Kenton McCarthy. And Kenton, we probably have known each other longer than anybody that's ever been on this program.
Yeah,
I
remember. I grew up
less than a teenager.
I grew up in suburban Chicago, and I was steeped in politics. But I came from the traditional mainstream conservative Wall Street Journal op-ed page, National Review, Cato, Heritage, and so on. All four of which I loathe today. But it was in 1992. I was minding my own business at work, and I got a call from one of your producers, and he said, Bruce is looking for a young, urban, sophisticated conservative to be on the show.
Right.
And I said, well, if you ditch the sophisticated part, I may be able to help you. So I called him back and I said, well, who else is going to be on the show? He said, Peter Heisinger, Coretta McFerrin, and Jesse Jackson. So I heard Jesse Jackson's name and I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. I'm going to have my first and last radio show in one evening, because I'll get my you-know-what handed to me. And through that, the best thing, it was a lively debate. Apparently I held my own, because
you did.
It's 28 years later and I'm here and he isn't.
Right. Okay. Well, well, he's just not here tonight. That's all. But again, you became an acquaintance to Jesse Jackson, did you not?
I like him, and you know who actually I like even more, who is two of the most profound gentlemen I've met on your show. One was Salim Muakil.
Yes.
And the other is Jesse Jackson Jr.
Right.
I have nothing but respect for Jesse Jackson Jr. and it saddened me to hear his political career collapse the way it did.
Right.
I like the guy. I love Salim. I think he's a great guy. I would debate with him all night long.
Good.
But the best thing that came from Beyond the Beltway was when it led to teaching at Malcolm X. It was then Malcolm X College, teaching a continuing ed course on business to inner city youths. That still, to me, is the highlight of these 28 years.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And again, you alluded to two things, and again, they will be on next week. We have two guests. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but we have two guests on next week who are frequent guests on this program now. They first heard this program when they were in high school. when they were in high school. They're on different sides politically now. They'll be with us next week. Let's go to some calls. We've been keeping them off the air. Let's go to Dave, listening to us in Spokane, Washington on KXLY. Go ahead, Spokane.
Well, hey, Bruce. This isn't my original comment, but I heard you talking about COVID-19. I just wanted to throw a quick thing out there. When you're talking about the data going the wrong direction, that's actually incorrect. If the cases were going up, but also the average age of those cases was going up, that would be bad. Cases going up and average age going down is exactly what we want to see, because it's statistically and scientifically fact that the youngest among us are the least susceptible to having severe reactions. There's the ones and twos, but they are the least susceptible. So this is actually a good thing to building herd immunity. Anyway, I just wanted to say that this overreaction society is driving me a little crazy. We have a policeman that uses excessive force that turns into riots about racism. We have statues coming down because people can't control their emotions, and kind of like your liberal guest there that gets extremely emotional and calls out your other guest, "Hey, woman." It's just a little bit of a overreaction society. I'd like to see people look at these statues and monuments and consider them holistically. And if you don't like certain aspects of them, discuss it and talk about what you don't like. I mean, when you see Roosevelt and you see, or Theodore Roosevelt and you see Abraham Lincoln, and people are trying to call these white supremacist and racist statues because they are elevated above the other men in the statue with them. Well, guess what? It's because they were the president of the United States, and presidents are elevated in stature above the average people generally because of their stature and their position. That's what happens.
Yeah. Well, it's also a lack of education and awareness. And I will say that there's a lack of education about American history on all sides. You're right. The people that are out there are tearing down statues, they don't know the history. And yet there's a lot of people, and we've talked, when we were talking, Juneteenth a couple of weeks ago, there's a lot of, white Americans that don't know anything about African American history or about Juneteenth and about those things. So I do believe that this need for education of American history, black and white, that is what we need. And again, if there's going to be a debate over whether a statute is going to be taken down, let there be a public debate amongst that municipality. Let them vote, but let them learn about the history. Hopefully this can turn into a teaching moment that both sides will be edified for and by when it happens. We do have to pause. Thank you very much for your call. 1-800-723-8029. More calls and our guests when we roll on from Evanston, Illinois. Bruce DuMont back, and let's go to David listening to us in San Francisco. Go ahead, David.
Oh, how are you, Bruce? Congratulations on 40 years.
Thank you, sir.
40 years ago, I lived in St. Louis, and you were probably on WLS, if I remember right?
No, I was on WLS for 22 years, but that was from 1992 forward. Before that, I was on WBEZ, and then I was also on several syndicated stations all over the country on mostly public radio stations.
Okay, I was
but you remember the show?
Well, sure. I mean, 40 years ago, I was trying to think if we heard it faintly after dark when some of those Clear Channel stations.
It's very possible. I have been heard faintly on many stations.
There you go. Hey, well, what I was looking at, in America, it's we the people own the country, right? The president is our employee, and if he runs into a disaster like an epidemic, we want that guy to be a symphony conductor. Mm-hmm. We want him to carefully, cleverly make sure that an epidemic dies down, the least amount of people are killed or injured, the least amount of distress.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're playing politics with the rescue supplies. You see Florida with their drinking laws. I mean, can you imagine Florida has basically gone dry? They've turned off the liquor in Florida just to make sure there's no drunks during an epidemic. which is totally smart. But they're going to have a whole bunch of people in what do they call it? When they're coming down from hooked on alcohol. I mean, this is a horrible situation.
Well, again, but again, what happens here is you are correct that we would hope that we would have a leader during this period, and we do, and some people like the leader and some people don't like the leader.
It's our property. That's where I'm going.
Good. However, there is personal responsibility, and just because the governor of a state says, "Okay, we're going to open things up," because he understands that the state has to get the economic engine revved up again, that doesn't mean that people can be lax or they can go out without a mask on. I mean, this debate over a mask, I just don't get it. Yeah. It's such a simple
thing.
I
mean, out here in San Francisco, it's a fashion statement out here. Yeah. And actually, I think Trump just appointed his 200th judge. I'd like to commission 200 different face mask designs. Impeach this judge. Impeach that judge. This is, their fashion statement. And you can cut, what is it, like 70% of the epidemic's power is cut with one side of a mask. Then the second mask is another 70%. Okay, well. So your chances of catching it are very slim if you both be smart about it and everybody settle down.
That's what people have to do. They've got to be smart about it. We're going to move on. Thanks for your call. I know you're a regular listener. And let's go to Mike in Spokane, Washington. Also, I recognize that name from Spokane. Mike, is this the gentleman that's been listening to this show for maybe 20 years?
I am, sir. Congratulations on 40 years Beyond the Beltway, Bruce.
Thank you.
Sometimes I used to call from the payphone.
Well, that's okay. Well, Spokane is a good example. Spokane is one of the early shows where we did a remote. And we did a remote because we received a call one night that told us the Speaker of the House, Tom Foley, a Democrat, was in trouble for his reelection in Spokane. And we went to Spokane. We did the show live from KXLY, which still carries this program. And by golly, Tom Foley, he got beat. And we had that story first because of a caller to this program. But what are you calling for tonight?
Well, you might want to come out and visit this summer, too, Coeur d'Alene Lake, Priest Lake. But I'm calling about racism is wrong, morally wrong. Yet, today we see the protesters, Bruce, tearing down statues and occupying cities. Seattle, statue of Juniper Sahara was destroyed in San Francisco. He was a Franciscan priest who founded the early Franciscan missions. Mm-hmm. So, these protesters want to tear down and occupy cities and destroy, but there's nothing behind it. It's anarchy, complete anarchy. Their form of government is anarchy. And where's Joe Biden in all this?
Well, Joe Biden has said that he disagrees with the defunding of police, and I want to ask Rick Garcia, who's our card-carrying Democrat this evening, and to pick up on something that Dawn Larsen said a segment or two ago, and that is she talked about the lack of enthusiasm amongst Democrats regarding Joe Biden, and I'm wondering if you would agree that enthusiasm may be a problem for the Democratic nominee. Rick?
I don't think so. I think there's more enthusiasm for Joe Biden than there was for Hillary Clinton. And I also see there is an enthusiasm from independents and moderate Republicans for Joe Biden. And so I'm very comfortable about this because, the president has failed on so many levels. And I think people of goodwill and people with common sense are understanding that, and they're getting behind Joe Biden.
Kenton McCarthy, would you agree with something that Rick said, and I need a 10-second answer, that a lot of people hated Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump used that to get elected? There may not be a lot of people who hate Joe Biden. I need a quick answer. Yes or no?
Correct. Donald Trump is running it against himself, and if he doesn't turn it around, he's going to self-destruct and elect Joe Biden for him.
Okay.
Bingo.
Kenton McCarthy, we thank you very much for joining us from Arizona. Dawn Larsen, thank you very much for joining us from South Dakota. Rick Garcia, thank you for joining us from the fashionable near north side of Chicago. Our thanks to Andrew Marshall for his assistance in the production of this program, along with Fritz Goldman, who's been with this program for a long, long time. Also, Todd Nebel, we thank him as well. I'm Bruce DuMont. Good night until next week from Evanston, Illinois.